crews were dispatched immediately, and the father told us that he was in the bathroom with his 2 children. There was smoke in the building, and he was obviously in fear of his life.
As firefighters arrived, they spotted the 999 caller was now out on the roof at the back of the home.
Sitting on a flat roof, potentially with a fire underneath you, is extremely dangerous.
They don't get more serious than that. There's a family in danger, in a fire, and they have to give 110% to save that family.
The man and his children were brought down to safety, but the children's mother was still believed to be inside.
We're aware there's still somebody to rescue, so the urgency is high. The firefighting crew entered the area and identified a body that had been burnt. There was clear evidence, due to the amount of burning, that she was a fatality.
The body was identified as 34-year-old mother of 2, Kirsty Wilson.
The intensity of burning was quite localised, leaving the rest of the property relatively unscathed, apart from some smoke damage. And that is unusual.
Was this a tragic accident? Was it something more sinister?
Kirsty Wilson was a vibrant, outgoing, vivacious, sociable woman with a great sense of humour who was exceptionally good at her job. Her mother described her as a woman who turned heads, and anybody who met her loved her as a person as well as a great friend and colleague.
Talking to people that knew Kirsty, she was vibrant, she was energetic, she was colourful, she was passionate, she had everything to live for.
In 1999, Kirsty met 31-year-old Alan Jermy.
Kirsty and Alan both worked in the motor vehicle industry. Kirsty worked for Mercedes, Alan worked for Volkswagen. Alan was quiet, he was introvert, he was intense, very private individual, very different to Kirsty.
Despite their differences in personality, the pair hit it off. They moved in together and welcomed 2 children.
6 or 7 years into their relationship, they seemed to be an ideal couple. A lovely house in a very smart part of Surrey, and 2 kids, and 2 very good jobs. But there was a clear difference between the lifestyle and between their own personalities. He was a black belt in martial arts. He spent almost all his time, certainly all his spare time, keeping fit, doing practices and just working out constantly, which his family played no part in.
After 8 years together, Alan and Kirsty began to drift apart.
In the spring of 2007, Kirsty begins to develop feelings for her boss at work.
She had known him since she joined the company as a graduate trainee, and little by little he seemed to be getting closer to her, and she seemed to be getting closer to him.
Unbeknownst to Alan Jermy, the pair began a relationship.
Kirsty and her boss spend an increasing amount of time together, and they're really forming quite a deep relationship.
Here was a man she could admire and she could love.
But not long into the couple's affair, their secret relationship was nearly exposed.
Jeremy discovered a text that the boss had sent Kirsty privately saying, "I wish I was with you now," and his suspicions immediately came to life. Kirsty's explanation, that this was nothing more than some mild flirting.
Despite his suspicions, Jeremy accepted her explanation. Kirsty and her boss's relationship continued to develop.
They were very excited about the future. They were very much in love with each other, and they had everything to look forward to. Kirsty had obviously kept that quiet for some time.
Kirsty's boss was married at that time, but he increasingly decided that his life surely lay with Kirsty, And so he took steps himself to end his relationship with his wife so that he would be available, hopefully in his eyes, to take up with a new life with Kirsty. Kirsty had to take steps along similar lines.
Kirsty decides to break the news to Alan that she wants a separation, but she doesn't tell him the exact circumstances about why.
She was somewhat concerned about how Alan would accept the news that she wanted to enter into a relationship with her boss. And so she broke it to him in stages.
Although there was no history of violence in the relationship, Kirsty had warned her boss about what Alan Jermy might be capable of.
She knew that he was a martial arts black belt, and she knew that if he lost his temper, then he could seriously hurt her if he wanted to. Alan Jermy and Kirsty were living together in the same house, but they were living separate lives.
After Kirsty confronts Alan about the separation, she wants to sleep in separate rooms, but Alan insists that they have to stay in the same room so as not to confuse the children. I think that this is Alan trying to remain in control of a situation that he feels increasingly out of control over.
He changed into the model partner. He was basically spending a lot more time at home. He was doing a lot more around the house. He was cooking. He was hoping that he could win her back and win her affections back and change her mind.
By the time she's approached Alan about ending the relationship, she's already fallen for someone else, and it's now just that Alan is catching up.
Despite Alan's best efforts, Kirsty made it clear the relationship was over.
Kirsty and Alan continue living together and co-parenting their children, and over these months it seems that Alan's coming to terms with the end of this relationship and they're both looking to move on.
Alan Jermy wrote a letter to Kirsty almost to confess that he had been the cause of the failure of their relationship.
The letter was basically thanking her for all the good times they'd spent together, for the happy times they'd had, but appreciating that she needed to move on.
He claimed that he was now over everything and was looking for a new relationship with other people himself.
Alan said that he had joined Match.com. He'd also changed his Facebook profile, so he was now a single person. He was saying to everybody that he accepted the breakup. He appreciated that they'd grown apart, that they were going to be adult about it, and that basically he would move on with his life.
In August 2008, the couple agreed to put their house up for sale.
They'd had the house decorated in preparation to do that, and for all intents and purposes, they were going their separate ways, and as we understood it, fairly amicably.
However much Alan Jermy wanted to give the outward impression that he was acting as a grown-up and accepting the inevitable and reacting in the right way, there was still part of him who still thought he could win Kirsty back. So the first moves to sell the house by putting it on the market must have led to a seminal moment in Alan Jermy's brain. At this moment, the reality he'd been trying to put off was now the truth.
Kirsty broke the news to Jermy that she was seeing another man.
Kirsty had made it clear that she was going to be in a relationship with her boss. She had also told Alan that there was a party coming up that she and her boss were going to attend, that they were going to be together at the party, and that they were going to spend the night together after the party.
Whilst he's appearing to be supportive and accepting of the separation, this has got to be quite overwhelming for Alan.
She was about to leave him for a new life with her boss. This must have come as a hammer blow to Alan Jermy's hopes and dreams. Before the house was due to go on the market, suddenly fire breaks out in the house.
Fire rescue.
Hello, I've got smoke in my house. I've got 2 young children in the house.
Are you able to get everybody out of the property?
I'm upstairs, the fire was downstairs, I'm not sure this
room.
Yeah. Come in, sweetie. Okay.
Are you all going into the bathroom?
Yeah. Right, shut.
You shut the door. Okay. Have you got a towel or something in there?
Yeah.
Can you soak it? Just the door.
Yeah, any water, sweetheart, any water. Okay, good girl, good girl.
It's at the bottom of the door you've blocked up there.
Oh, just, yeah. Water.
Yeah, that'll just prevent any smoke going
Right, put it up behind the door. The only thing is, I don't know where my partner is.
Right. Do you think she's in the house? Or?
Yeah, I went to bed early.
The information we've received is a person's reported fire. They don't get much more serious than that. The urgency to get there is at utmost, but they're also aware that they will be risking their lives and seconds count. It's all about speed, it's all about urgency, it's all about saving life. Their search quicker.
When firefighters entered the living room, they discovered Kirsty's body.
The smoke was clearing at this stage, and it became evident to the crew that the extent of damage and burns to the casualty was quite severe, and that the chances of the casualty being alive were very remote. I think firefighters in particular always go through a little bit of soul searching, thinking, could we have saved that person? But I think in this particular case, that was tempered by the fact that Kirsty was clearly dead before we arrived. There was significant burning to the face, upper torso, and there was limited fire damage in and around the body, which indicated that the fire was localised on Kirsty as opposed to Kirsty becoming a victim of fire spread.
When paramedics arrived, Kirsty Wilson was pronounced dead at the scene.
Whenever someone dies in a fire, police are always called. It's our job working with the fire service to investigate how the fire started, but more importantly, how someone came to die, to understand whether that was a tragic accident or something more.
Alan Jermy and his 2 children were taken to hospital as a precaution.
I recall that a lot of the people that were first at the scene made a comment that ultimately Alan was very calm, very relaxed at the scene, and the ambulance crew made remarks that Alan mentioned nothing about Kirsty on the way to the hospital.
This is unusual as someone who's just gone through a traumatic loss of an ex-partner and the mother of your children. However, it's not enough to immediately, on its own, cause red flags when everyone responds to trauma in very different ways.
At Jermy's home, police and fire personnel inspected the scene.
There were some things that were very concerning very quickly.
On our arrival, there was some smoke in the road, but it wasn't billowing out of the building. It was more like a thick, moderate fog than a billowing, dense black fire that the crews were prepared for.
The fire was very localised to the lounge. Certainly no evidence of a lot of smoke damage in the property, so that clearly didn't add up.
One firefighter memorably described it as nothing worse than a smoke-filled barroom in a pub during the days when you were allowed to smoke indoors.
With the fire under control, police and firefighters looked for a possible cause.
In looking into a fire, there now becomes the possibility of a criminal process, and therefore the police lead on that.
It's our job to work with the fire service in particular to investigate that fire, find out how it started, and find out ultimately how Kirsty has come to die.
There was clearly a slight smell of accelerant or some kind of fuel-based smell. There was no evidence of smoking material near Kirsty. We would look at potential electrical causes. There was no electrical causes near Kirsty, and therefore we now can only look at Kirsty. There was limited fire damage in and around her body. There was limited damage on the carpets and furniture, but her body was quite seriously burnt, and that is unusual. To me, it looked like it was a deliberate fire.
And the positioning of Kirsty's body raised further questions.
It looks like she's been specifically positioned to look as though she's fallen asleep whilst watching TV, with a pillow under her head.
Now, if she was overcome with fumes and was trying to fight for her life, surely she would have been on her hands and knees trying to escape. This seemed a very strange, almost posed posture for a woman in a smoke-filled room.
With the physical evidence pointing to foul play, paramedics at the scene also had some concerns.
I vividly remember at least one of them saying that from their experience, they believed Kirsty may have been dead longer than the timeline in terms of the 999 call would suggest. So at this point, I believe Kirsty's been killed, and this is a murder investigation.
4 hours after calling 999, Alan Jermy was taken into custody and questioned about Kirsty's death.
We've only got a certain amount of time with Alan in custody, so it's important that we get as much information from him as possible. At this point, we've still got an open mind. It's really important to say that at the end of the day, we're trying to prove or disprove whether Alan has been involved.
Jermy put forward his version of what happened the night that Kirsty died.
According to Alan, he gives his daughters dinner. They all watch Disney Channel for a little while before he takes the girls to bed.
Alan Jermy went out at about 8:30 or thereabouts to fill up his car with petrol and to draw out some money from the cash machine. He'd then gone back home and basically sat with Kirsty.
He then went to bed, leaving Kirsty downstairs watching Big Brother.
And that was the last time that he'd seen her.
Alan Jermy told the police that as far as he was concerned, an intruder must have broken into the house, murdered Kirsty, and set fire to the house.
He was adamant that he hadn't been responsible for the death of his partner.
We are looking and have an open mind to looking at other lines of inquiry. I can't preclude that someone else is either responsible or has worked with Alan in killing Kirsty. I'm looking for any evidence that someone else had done this.
At Alan Jermy's home, detectives looked for any evidence to support Alan's theory that someone else may have been responsible for Kirsty's death.
We've only got so much time with Alan in custody, and we might only have his house for a finite amount of time. And we need to try and, make sure we recover as much evidence as quickly as possible. There was no sign of any forced entry. Equally importantly, when I looked in the kitchen, there was cash. There was laptops, there were phones. Now, if someone had broken into the property, this was a burglary that had gone wrong as an example, why would you leave all those valuable possessions behind? Straight away, we're very concerned.
Police found no evidence to suggest that another person had been responsible and identified Alan Jermy as their prime suspect. Where in the property?
When we were searching the house, we found a stun gun in one of the bedrooms. A highly unusual item. Who has a stun gun in their house? I have no idea whose it was, whether it had been used, what it was for, but at that point I just knew that it was something that we had to take as part of our investigation.
Meanwhile, investigators looked to confirm Alan Jermy's timeline of events.
Once Alan told us he'd been to the petrol station, it's quite usual for us to try and corroborate that to see whether he's telling us the truth. The obvious way of doing that is looking at CCTV at the petrol station, which we did obtain, and it did show Alan at the petrol station at the time he said. Interestingly, what we were able to see, not just what he did, but what he was wearing.
There was CCTV from the petrol station showing that when he filled the car up with petrol, he was wearing black jogging bottoms and a white t-shirt.
What was interesting about that is that when we searched the house, that evening, that morning, we found those tracksuit bottoms in the washing machine and they'd been washed. For me, that was really interesting. Why would you take your tracksuit bottoms off that you'd had on that evening and just put those in the wash cycle? What were you trying to hide?
Police suspect Jeremy may have been attempting to destroy evidence.
The jogging bottoms were tested by scientists who did discover some hydrocarbons, which was indicative that they might have been associated with petrol.
Jeremy's story suggested he had returned home from the petrol station at around 9 p.m, 3 hours before emergency services were called.
One thing we will typically do in any murder investigation is look at phones, use of phones, in particular Kirsty's phone. I found that Kirsty's phone had sent a text that evening to her boss, her boyfriend, at about 9:10 that night. Her boss had replied at about 9:20.
He expected her reply, but it never came, and this was exceptionally unusual.
Alan made the 999 call just before midnight, at 9:20, and for several minutes afterwards, her boyfriend had texted her back, and there was no reply. At this point, I suspect that Kirsty was dead.
Detectives probed deeper into Kirsty and Jeremy's relationship in the weeks preceding her death.
Alan had registered with a dating website or websites and had gone on some dates. So for anyone looking in from the outside, for all intents and purposes, Alan was accepting A, of the separation, and B, was moving on with his life.
However, just engagement in the dating process doesn't necessarily mean that someone's moved on from any hurt and difficult feelings they might have over a previous relationship. He wanted to set it up like he's taking the positive steps that he needs to move on from the end of this relationship.
From our investigation, we found that he'd penned a letter on the laptop that was quite to the contrary. It basically was a letter begging her not to go and that he wanted her back.
I think the police were deeply suspicious of Alan Jeremy's claims that he had totally accepted the separation of their relationship, because they believed that this was the motive for why Alan Jeremy killed Kirsty.
Kirsty's friends spoke with police and revealed that she had raised some concerns about his behaviour.
Despite Alan telling Kirsty he was fine with their separation and he'd written a letter to wish her all the best, she had her suspicions that he was spying on her. In fact, she even went as far as to tell friends that one evening she'd found him crawling around the bottom of her bed in the middle of the night and was checking her phone. The more we found out about Alan, it was really clear that he didn't want her to leave him. Alan wasn't comfortable with their separation, and more importantly, he didn't want her to be with anybody else.
I think it's entirely possible that as the practical elements of the separation are now all coming to a head, the house going on the market, him telling the parents, him having to tell the children, I think that these are the trigger points that secure to Alan that this is real and it is final. So this is building a picture of not the placid and accepting character that Alan's been trying to portray, and instead someone that is becoming increasingly paranoid and is actually causing fright to Kirsty now.
I think Kirsty had every reason to be frightened of Alan. He was a trained black belt martial arts expert. She knew that would he ever want to, he could hurt her very badly.
When we spoke to witnesses, neighbours, people that knew them, that neighbours had heard in the past arguments, which wasn't unsurprising given the fact that they were now separating. But what was really interesting, on the night of Kirsty's death, no one had heard any struggle, any arguments. There was certainly no signs of a disturbance in the house. There was no injuries to Kirsty, no wounds, anything that suggested there'd been a struggle. So it still raised the question, what had happened to Kirsty? How had she died?
Kirsty's body was sent for a post-mortem to establish what had caused her death.
Whilst Kirsty had some burns to her body, the fire hadn't taken enough to completely destroy the evidence. We know from examining Kirsty's body that there was evidence of strangulation. There was no soot in her airways, which meant she was killed before the fire had been set. And we also know there was no signs of any injuries or defence wounds. There'd been certainly no struggle before she'd died. So what we did know is that Kirsty had been strangled to death, and we also know the fire hadn't killed her. The fire had been set deliberately to destroy the evidence.
As the fire burned downstairs, Alan Jeremy called 999.
Fire rescue.
Hello, I've got smoke in my house and I've got 2 young children in the house.
Okay, you're able to get everybody out of the property?
I'm upstairs, the fire was downstairs, I'm not sure, there's just smoke coming from upstairs.
Right, okay, so you're not able to get out at the moment?
I'm not at the moment, and I've got 2 young children upstairs.
Someone who has committed a murder, ringing 999. That's quite unusual. But what's even more unusual about that call is how rehearsed, perhaps, cold, calculated, callous Alan is in that call.
Okay, have you got a towel or something in there?
Yeah.
Can you soak it under the door?
Yeah, any water, sweetheart, any water. Okay, good girl, good girl.
Okay, is that the bottom of the door you've blocked up there?
Oh, just, yeah, good.
Yeah, that'll just prevent any smoke going
Right, put it up behind the door. Good girl, good girl.
For those children, it must have been a very distressing experience. They don't know what's going on, they don't know where their mother is. It's almost like he's using his daughters and their fear to add to the urgency and legitimacy that he's trying to present in the call.
This is a man who put his children's life at risk by setting fire to a house that, for all he knew, could have gone up like a tinderbox and put his children's lives in jeopardy.
The only thing is,
Yeah.
I don't know where my partner is.
Right, do you think she's in the house? Or?
Yeah, I went to bed early.
It feels quite awkward when he introduces the information about his partner being inside, because it's done quite clumsily.
What's the name of your partner?
Kirsty.
Even when asked, is there anyone else in the house, having told the operator of his 2 daughters, it was some considerable time before he even got round to mentioning Kirsty being downstairs.
Throughout the whole call, he doesn't call out for Kirsty once. Doesn't scream her name. Doesn't shout out to see if she's okay. That's because he's killed her.
Alan Jeremy was charged with murder.
Throughout his interviews, Alan denied any involvement whatsoever or any responsibility for Kirsty's death. He was cold, he was calm. For me, if I'm an innocent man who's been wrongfully arrested for the murder of my partner, I'm not so sure I would be as calm and as collected as he was.
Alan Jeremy has a very structured and planned approach to this murder of Kirsty.
He clearly thought he'd get away with it. He set that fire hoping to destroy the evidence, hoping to kill Kirsty and to live his life with his 2 children, and no one would ever know.
However, the actual execution does not line up with that structured and planned approach. He's clearly someone who likes stability and control, and as the separation between him and Kirsty is becoming more finalised, and he's at risk of losing the life which he enjoys, perhaps the change of access to his daughters, this has all fueled him to take revenge.
Alan was clearly consumed by jealousy, and selfishly, rather than let anybody else have Kirsty, let her live her life, he took it.
In the summer of 2009, Alan Jeremy faced trial, charged with the murder of Kirsty Wilson.
I remember the trial distinctly. Alan sat in the dock, and I remember he was still very, very calm, very cold, I would say, throughout, which had been consistent throughout our entire investigation. He denied any involvement still at this point in our murder. He hadn't admitted to a thing.
He seemed smug and lacking in showing any signs of emotional remorse. He wasn't showing any emotion for the loss of his long-term ex-partner, the mother of his children.
Alan Jermy took to the stand to put forward his side of the story.
His defence was that he fully accepted that Kirsty hadn't died as a result of smoke inhalation, that she had been either strangled or strangled and suffocated, but that he had not been responsible for it. He maintained the account that somebody else must have been responsible.
So somebody had walked into his property, no signs of any forced entry, no signs of any broken windows. They'd walked straight in, they'd found his petrol canister, they'd murdered Kirsty without any signs of a struggle, no disturbance. They'd set the fire and they'd left completely undetected. It was quite remarkable.
Under cross-examination, the prosecution looked for holes in Jermy's story.
It was part of Alan's account that he and Kirsty had watched Big Brother together.
What was interesting is I turned the TV on and saw the TV had been paused from the previous evening on a programme called Hannah Montana on the Disney Channel, which was a programme that Alan and Kirsty's children watched before they went to bed. That told me that Kirsty hadn't been watching telly after those children had gone to bed.
Prosecutors also drew attention to the jogging bottoms, which had shown traces of petrol. But under cross-examination, the defence landed an important blow.
The scientist who gave evidence about that conceded that because of the firefighters moving through the premises and through areas where petrol had been, and also when Mr. Jermy was filling his car at the petrol station, those hydrocarbons may have got there as a result of that, and not indicate that he'd been responsible for pouring the petrol in the scene.
The jury were told about the stun gun that was found at Jermy's home, as well as details of how it had been acquired.
We found evidence of a purchase for a stun gun from abroad. He'd done it in Kirsty's name. Why would you purchase a stun gun? More importantly, why would you purchase it in someone else's name?
The prosecution put it forward that it had been deliberately bought in her name to disguise the fact that it had been obtained, and that he had thought it would never have been discovered.
We subsequently found out later on that a package had been delivered to the property. I think it may have been found by one of Kirsty's parents. The package had been taken away by Alan. I suspected that was probably the stun gun, and he had told Kirsty it was DVD so that she didn't look for the package.
It suggests a level of pre-planning from Alan, where he has gone online, intentionally ordered these items and then hidden them from Kirsty.
But the defence told a different story.
The package had arrived addressed to Kirsty. Kirsty's father had given it to Alan. He claimed that he had never seen the stun gun, although he was aware she had spoken about getting one, because when they moved apart, she would be on her own and would need some form of protection.
The prosecution put forward their version of how Kirsty Wilson had died.
It was our case that Alan had subdued Kirsty, strangled Kirsty and set fire to the house. Whether he'd done that with the stun gun or whether he'd used his hands to do that, only Alan will know. But what we do know and what we did present to the jury is clearly Alan as a capable, strong, skilled martial artist who may have used those skills to incapacitate Kirsty.
The one unanswered question was, why was there no defence marks on Kirsty? The prosecution suggested that by stunning Kirsty, Jermy could then throttle her with his hands. He could do it in a way that would leave minimum amount of evidence in terms of bruising on her throat. He then hoped that by covering her throat and neck area with extra amounts of petrol, that would then destroy the evidence. But because the fire did not catch as strongly as he had hoped and expected, the pathologist was still able to show that strangulation had taken place.
We made an application to exclude the stun gun because there was no evidence that it had actually been used in the course of the murder. That was only a theory put forward by the prosecution. But the judge ruled against that. That presented something of a difficulty for the defence. However, during the course of the trial, we've made some impact in relation to the points that they made, being able to explain quite a few of them away. We dealt with the hydrocarbons. Basically, they didn't have any evidence that the stun gun had been used. There was good evidence that he loved her, that he loved his children, and that basically he had been sensible about the breakup and was coming to terms with it.
Following a 4-week trial, the jury retired for deliberations.
No one knows what a jury's verdicts will be except the 12 people who are making that decision.
That moment when the jury go out to consider their verdict, despite the evidence and no matter how well you've presented your case, you never take anything for granted, and ultimately it seems like an eternity.
After 5 hours of deliberations, the jury were ready to return their verdict.
Those moments, those seconds in court, you can hear a pin drop. But thankfully and rightfully in this case, the right verdict was delivered, and he was guilty.
Alan Jermy was found guilty of the murder of Kirsty Wilson and sentenced to life in prison with a minimum term of 16 years.
The judge told Jeremy directly to his face, "How do you explain to 2 young children why they will never see their mother again?"
The things that will always stick with me with this case is the cold, calculated way in which Alan tried to hide his crime, how selfish he was in doing what he did, putting his children's lives at risk. But more than that, how he took away their mum.
Alan Jermy will be eligible for parole in 2025.
If Alan Jermy does get parole, I think if I was a family member, it would never be long enough, and he should never come out. We'll never know if that was premeditated, that murder, whether he'd spent weeks, days, hours planning what he was going to do to Kirsty. What we do know, though, is that after he'd killed her, and before he rang 999, he had several hours in which to think about what he would do next. Could he call the police and admit there'd been a terrible accident, something had gone terribly wrong? Or do you spend several hours thinking about how you are going to conceal your crime? He took Kirsty's life.
Tonight, on an all-new 2020, a young woman is missing, but her family had to fight so hard to get any national attention.
Why is no one saying Tamika Houston's name at the same time as Natalie Holloway or Lacey Peterson? I went to the key locations to follow the investigation.
A search warrant to test for possible blood.
In your heart, you're thinking something's wrong.
I knew at that point that time was of the essence. She's gone. Like, we have to find her. She has to be in danger.
It was just like, oh my God, what's going on?
You went to Spartanburg. You wanted to see the location.
If you're looking for somebody, you gotta go. You gotta look for them. I remember just sitting outside of her house in the car by myself, still not knowing what's going on.
I wanna know before I leave here, y'all gonna tell me something. Either she dead or we done found her.
You're Tamika's last known boyfriend.
Yeah.
You've got to know that people are going to look at you.
I told them, you're wasting time.
Tamika's home is here, and then they find the car across town at this apartment complex, which made no sense.
I saw this vision of someone looking through these woods or these bushes. I knew it was connected to Tamika.
Was that a real moment for you in this investigation? The key unlocks a door?
We talked about her not being here at 25.
You talked about her not being alive?
Yes.
What do you mean?
When police entered this home on June 16, 2004, they find a disturbing scene. A dog which has apparently given birth to a litter of puppies with no owner in sight. That discovery would trigger the search for 24-year-old Tamika Houston. You get a call from Tamika's aunt that she's missing. How frantic was she?
In missing person cases, you learn from what how their family reacts. And once I met with Rebecca and talked with her, I knew it was serious.
My name is Steve Lamb. I was the lieutenant over the Investigation Bureau at the time. I did not know Tamika, but I felt like that Rebecca knew something was not right.
My sister Gabriella called me and she said, listen, she said, Beck, she said, I called her and she hasn't called me back yet. I was like, oh my gosh, Gabby, you know what? She hasn't called me back either.
And what are you thinking?
I panic at that point because it's one thing for her to ignore a casual message, but not a message like, Tamika, I need you to call me right now. So I picked up the phone and called the Spartanburg Public Safety Department to report her missing.
So you get this call. What's your first effort to check this out?
So our patrol division responds first. They check the residence. Nothing unusual, knock on the door, check the mailbox, check with neighbors.
I remember being on the phone and they're telling me, you know, there doesn't seem to be signs of a disturbance, like the doors are locked. Her car wasn't there, which so like, oh, maybe she did just take a trip.
To be honest with you, it was typical for her to, go through a moment where she was just doing her own thing. So it didn't really raise any red flags.
Tamika's parents were divorced. Her dad lived in South Carolina and her mom, Gabriella, lived in Virginia.
It wasn't unlike her to get in her car and drive from Spartanburg and show up at Gabby's doorstep with no notice. Showed up in Miami and called me and was like, hey, I'm gonna come down for dinner tonight. We had family all up and down the East Coast. Just no one had heard from her.
At what point do you go in?
One of the investigators felt like there was an odor coming from the residence.
Well, I knew that, there was potentially a crime scene. Honestly, I expected to find her in there, but she wasn't.
They did a wellness check, and they found things in her home that were completely inconsistent with her personality.
There was a dog inside and a puppy, and I think there were more puppies at one time, but they had died. The dog had drank all the water out of its bowl, eaten all of its food, drank all the water out of the toilet. It was just obvious that she had not been there in quite some time.
When law enforcement finally showed up at her house, her pit bull was there on the verge of starvation. There was only one puppy who was still barely alive.
There's death inside. It's like a crime scene that the dog is telling us, she's gone, she's missing. Go find her.
That scared me. That really, really scared me because I knew Macy was like her child. It was just a horrific scene.
Tamika's Aunt Rebecca, her mom's younger sister, lived in Miami. The two had been close since Tamika was a child.
We're only 7 years apart, so honestly, she was really more like a little sister to me.
That's Tamika opening a present from her Aunt Becky.
Oh, thank you. Oh my gosh, I wanted to see.
She was full of personality. She was only 4'11", but when she walked into the room, you'd think she's 6 feet tall because she just commanded the attention of the room.
Me and Tamika actually met in junior high school. She had just transferred from another district, and I was assigned to her that day. Kind of showed her around the school, became fast friends.
What was the bond like between the two of them, Tamika and Zelda?
Zelda and Tamika loved each other. They were, you know, thick as thieves right away. They were more than friends, they were sisters.
At the time, Tamika lived with her father, Anthony, in Spartanburg, South Carolina, where she would eventually settle.
She loved my dad. They fuss, fight, just like any other father and daughter relationship. But I do know that my dad, he loved the ground that my sister walked on. My name is Antonia. Tamika was my big sister. I couldn't tell that she was much older than me. Like, she was always playing the games that I wanted to play. They said my sister had a temper. Like, she would snap on you in a blink of an eye. But she was a really good person.
She was free-spirited and very, very spiritual because she grew up in a church.
She had a humble spirit. That was just, oh my God, that was just so different.
She was talented.
Oh, she had a voice, yes. Yeah, she could sing. She really could.
She wanted to try for American Idol. Tell me about that.
We went to American Idol. God, that was an experience.
Over 10,000 people packed into the Georgia Dome.
You know, we were excited. We were happy to be there. And she made it through the first round.
Her favorite artist was Lauryn Hill. She could sing her songs just the way that she sung them.
And just like Lauryn Hill in Sister Act 2,
because I'm happy.
Tamika does a rendition of His Eye is on the Sparrow at her aunt's wedding.
His eye is on the sparrow.
She sang at your wedding.
She did, yeah. It's one of the most special memories we have. We talked about it for years, even before I was engaged to be married. I'm gonna sing at your wedding one day.
He watches me.
Everyone talked about her big voice and this tiny, tiny body that you just would not or could not ignore.
You were just drawn to her, and strangers were drawn to her. She was a little, I think, too open-hearted to folks, and a little bit too trusting.
She had a soft heart for people and for animals.
Yeah, she loved animals. I'm not a dog person, but Tamika loved her dogs.
And now, strangely, police have found her dog Macy seemingly abandoned, with Tamika nowhere to be found.
There was no way she would just up and leave her beloved dog to starve.
In your heart, you're thinking something's wrong.
I knew at that point that time was of the essence. She's disappeared, she's gone. Like, we have to find her. She has to be in danger.
That's actress Erica Alexander shining on the red carpet after starring in the Oscar-winning movie American Fiction.
One day maybe you'll learn that not being able to relate to other people isn't a badge of honor.
But so many remember her as that hard-charging lawyer in the 90s sitcom Living Single.
Look, I'm the lawyer here. I know how to work the system.
Erica's also an activist and a documentarian. In 2020, in the midst of protest over racial injustices in this country, she was approached about creating a podcast about Tamika Houston's disappearance.
And at the time I thought, actually, probably no, because I knew then that very few people would want to make something about a black girl. But then, of course, I said yes, thinking, well, if not you, Erica, who? Audible Originals presents Finding Tamika, hosted by Erica Alexander.
Months of reporting leads to Finding Tamika, a 10-part true crime audio series executive produced by actor and comedian Kevin Hart and influential radio host Charlemagne the God.
Kevin was on the same time that I was. He was like, man, this is a story that we need to amplify because of the epidemic of black women that go missing in this country.
You really gave a lot of your life to this story.
That's what it needed. It needed sweat equity.
If you know anything about Erica Alexander, if you've ever worked with her, she's hands-on.
I hunted for clues and explanation with the family. I rode along with a detective who trailed the case, all with a goal to truly find out what really happened to Tamika.
You went to Spartanburg. You wanted to see the location.
Yeah.
You needed to be there.
It was important to be there because everything took place there. Cool, Spartanburg.
Spartanburg. It's a small town in the south. Started out as a cotton mill area.
A lot of people come here to raise their families. So I would describe it as a place that you can call home.
If you look at the statistics, I don't think Spartanburg is per capita anymore violent than any other. But like every other jurisdiction, you know, you're far more likely to be killed by somebody that knows you than you are a stranger.
I remember just sitting outside of her house in the car by myself, still not knowing what's going on. And then I heard that my sister was missing. We definitely thought like she would be walking down the street in a minute.
I remember Rebecca calling and saying that they were coming here to meet with the police department. It was just like, oh my God, what's going on?
I booked a flight and I had to come here.
Rebecca, well connected in the PR world, jumped in to use her experience in the media to help spread the word about her niece's disappearance.
The first thing I did after landing was go directly to the police station. I remember being very fixated on getting the public information officer to do a press release.
I remember saying she wasn't going to leave the building until someone did some media stuff, and we did. And I think just of her persistence that I felt like it was important.
Tamika's mom, Gabriella, makes an emotional plea on the local news for her daughter's return.
I know deep down in my heart that somebody knows something, but please, we plead, just let us know where she is.
We just kind of designed a flyer, and we're just putting up all around town.
Flyers have gone up in her neighborhood to help police.
At the top, in bright red type, was the word missing. Below it, in black, all caps, Tamika Antoinette Houston. Next to a description of her tattoo was a photo of Tamika. It's the Tamika everyone knows, confident, assured, and in control.
What are you hearing from her friends around that time about her habits?
Yeah, a lot of her friends are thinking she's out of town. And a lot of people originally are saying that that's not unusual.
They thought she was going on a trip, and all those little possibilities we have to run down.
Normally, she would have told someone, some family member, where she was going or if she was going somewhere.
When she disappeared, Tamika was living alone. She had recently quit her waitressing job, and her family says she was trying to find herself.
The reason why it took a moment for it to be discovered that she was missing, because she was at a crossroads. She wasn't working. She told her mom that she wanted to return to school.
She had broken up with her boyfriend.
She had broken up with her boyfriend. So it was just kind of like a perfect storm of events.
You're her last known boyfriend. How did you meet, and what was special about her?
My family had a corner store. It's called Shirley's Pantry. And I leave the pantry and I saw Tamika, and Tamika's 4'11".
Small.
Yes, but thick in the waist. Very thick in the waist. So, and I could see she was very attractive. As I was getting on my motorcycle, I heard a voice say, "Do you have an extra helmet?" So I said, "No, you can wear mine." And it was like love at first sight. It was like a trust love, not just an attraction, something deeper than that.
Tamika was someone who came into Terrance's life like a comet. He was newly separated, and her boldness and free-spiritedness was a breath of fresh air.
I know that she was deeply in love with him and vice versa.
I remember Terrance being a funny guy. Always joking, always laughing, and he kept my sister smiling. I do remember that.
Terrence was actually the first boyfriend that Tamika was really serious about. Overall, he seemed to me to have a very kind heart. He seemed very protective of Tamika.
And it was Terrence who first raised the alarm about Tamika being missing.
I got a phone call from Terrence, who left me a message, actually.
Hi, Becky. This is Terrence. I've been trying to get in contact with Tamika. Nobody seems to have heard from her, so I just want to know if she's safe. That's all. Thank you.
He said that he hadn't been in touch with Tamika, that she wasn't returning his phone calls. My instinct was that I know that one of the last conversations I had with her, she had told me that they had broken up, so I thought that she was perhaps just avoiding him, but surely she wouldn't avoid me, so I'll just call her.
Days with no word from Tamika, Rebecca contacts the Spartanburg Police Department asking them to conduct a welfare check on her home.
So it wasn't unusual for her mother or relatives not to have heard from her for a while. Nobody was alarmed right away.
Not right away. Not until we went to the house and Macy was at.
Tamika's ex-boyfriend, Terrence, kind of got the ball rolling, started calling people.
He's the one who told everybody that he couldn't find Tamika. So it's a very ironic thing to be the person who calls Rebecca and the mother, Gabby, and says, I can't find Tamika. And suddenly the eyes start turned toward you.
You always look to boyfriends. I mean, that's the first place you look.
2020 obtained never-before-seen law enforcement interviews. In this videotaped statement, Rebecca tells police that Tamika had shared some concerns about Terrence.
He was staying up real late at night, not really sleeping, pacing the floor, quoting scripture, like excessively, that his actions were being directed by God. It just worried me.
According to talking to her friends and other people in the community, those two were over.
I mean, she was like, oh, well, we're not together anymore. And she started to cry about it. And I was like, well, you guys, y'all will get back together. And she was like, she called me Zeke. She was like, Zeke, I don't know about that this time around. I think I'm done.
She and Terrence had a pretty volatile relationship.
So you got the feeling that any place where there's smoke, there's fire. He admitted to that.
She and he had some domestic violence type issues prior. So that was the first person that we were interested in this case.
Her and Terrence had this domestic dispute. So it was all kind of thoughts going through my mind.
Now, was Terrence involved? Did he do something and something had gone too far?
Police want to know what Terrence knows, so they bring him in for questioning.
Lacey Peterson was 8.5 months pregnant when she disappeared from her Modesto home Christmas Eve.
Her husband Scott says he was out fishing when she vanished.
Around the same time Tamika has gone missing, Scott Peterson is in the news. He's a suspect in the murder of his wife, Lacey.
Scott Peterson attended this New Year's Eve vigil for Lacey in Modesto, California.
All the way across the country in Spartanburg, South Carolina, Tamika's family is holding a vigil too. And all eyes are on her concerned ex-boyfriend, Terrence.
We really worried about her. Been by Tamika's home and none of her mail has been picked up. She hadn't called her mom.
There's a vigil for Tamika.
Mm-hmm.
You attend this vigil.
Mm-hmm.
You're Tamika's last known boyfriend.
Yeah.
Now
yeah.
she's missing. You've got to know that people are going to look at you.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, I was prepared for that.
Terrence was at that vigil, and some people were looking suspiciously at him.
I know that Anthony, Tamika's dad, had strong feelings about that. I felt like maybe he wasn't being as forthcoming about information, and I just wanted to make sure that he was telling me everything he knew, and that if he wasn't going to tell me, that he was at least being forthcoming with police.
And now with cameras rolling, Terrence is ready to answer some questions.
Yeah, I want y'all to tape it. Yeah, do that, man. Yeah, that's... Yeah.
I'm gonna do that. I'm gonna shut the door.
Ain't no problem. That's fine. Yeah. Good.
We started following up on past history and interviewed him to see if he may be linked to her disappearance.
If you talk to anybody, man, that knows me, man, I ain't nothing but love, man. I ain't nothing but love. And I, you know what I'm saying, I have been for the last 2 weeks, man, Scott Peterson.
He was pretty open about the fact that there had been violence in their relationship. That's not something that most people volunteer. So the fact that he was honest about something that was inculpatory, I think tended to make them believe him a little bit more when he said, look, I haven't seen her. I understand why you're talking to me, but I didn't do it.
I could disappear on y'all and make y'all do some work. My people been loading up, man. You want to leave here? I'm like, no, I don't want to leave. I want to know before I leave here, y'all gonna tell me something. Either she did or we done found her before I leave here.
You tell police that even though you've broken up, that you still have feelings for her.
We had to separate. But the bond, it wasn't going nowhere.
I love her, man, and I miss her, and I want her to come home.
Police have no evidence linking Terrence to Tamika's disappearance, but he remains a person of interest.
What must it be like to suddenly walk in a room and people are saying that you killed your girlfriend or you could be a murderer? Where do you hide? Where do you go? You don't.
Word of Tamika's disappearance spread through the community, with missing persons posters plastered everywhere. One at this gas station caught the eye of a woman who noticed the description of Tamika's car matched an abandoned vehicle at her apartment complex.
Sunday, I got called at home and said that patrol officers had found her vehicle on the other side of town.
Tamika's home is here, and then they find the car across town at this apartment complex, which made no sense.
Yeah, no, not at all. And I think for a while it confused them.
You find the car. What's your first assessment once you find it?
We knew it had been there a while. The windows was cracked. It had been raining in them. So we could not link her to being anywhere in that area.
And there's really nothing forensic-wise that we recovered from that vehicle. It wasn't like there was her blood or DNA or anything.
And now there's her car, but no Tamika. So I'm sure that sent fear through her family's heart.
That was really tough because when you're going through it, it's like your emotions, it's like such a range of emotions because at first it's like, oh my gosh, they found their car. You're thinking, oh, well, maybe she's just been staying with someone. So, oh, this is the break that we need. But then, you know, when we all descend upon, the police are kind of like, it kind of looks like this car has been here for quite a long time. It just makes you even a little bit more desperate.
Kids, they used to say to me, like, your sister's dead. She's never coming back home. Y'all need to stop searching for her.
Finding Tamika's abandoned car was a blow to her family. But inside it, police make a key discovery.
Her car was found at Barksdale Apartments, and during the search of her car, a key was located.
It was a set, I believe, 5 or 6 keys. You can tell one's a house key, 2 of them is a vehicle key, and maybe 2 more as locks.
They didn't fit her house, they didn't fit her car. We didn't really know what these keys were for or where they had come from.
That led us in a little bit of the right direction and also into more problems.
You find keys in this car that don't seem to belong to her.
Correct.
That was a critical moment.
Yes. We had no clue where they went to.
That was an added mystery that the police were dealing with at the time.
Now that Tamika's car has been discovered abandoned, detectives want to go back and take a closer look inside her home.
But once we found the car, that kind of started the case to be more suspicious that it may be something criminal involved.
I just remember being across the house. As it started to get dark, they were spraying the luminol and that very eerie, emanating purplish blue lights that you see coming from the house. And that was really difficult because it felt very surreal and it's terrifying because you're like, what's going to be revealed?
No signs of foul play, no new leads at Tamika's house. But then,
Department 911.
A 911 call sends police on a mission.
Her car was
found abandoned on the north side of town.
No one has seen or heard from her in nearly a month.
I want Tamika to know that we love her and we want her to come home.
In the very beginning, where does this investigation take you? Are you getting any leads?
Not really. We put out some stuff locally, media, and talked to the families, neighborhoods, some community people here who knew Tamika, but really didn't have a lot to go on.
And you get this 911 call.
Yes.
Something on 911?
My brother just came to my house and told me that he killed his girlfriend and put her in Clean Park Lake.
You have a 911 call that talks about someone being put in the lake that's been killed, and it's pretty much the exact same length of time the car had been sitting in the parking lot.
Did it sound credible that somebody might have tossed somebody in this small lake?
It sounded credible to us, just the way the guy was talking.
Where does he live? He stay over there in Barksdale.
The Barksdale is the same apartment complex where police found Tamika's abandoned car, and it's just blocks away from Cleveland Park Lake. Police get wind of a 911 call that happened about the time of her disappearance. You listened to it. What did you make of that?
Who is making this phone call? And they're talking about dredging the lake and doing all these things with the lake. It just adds kind of to the desperation of the situation.
We actually put some divers in that day, 2 local divers, and they couldn't find anything. And then we put cadaver dogs were here as well, and they kind of cleared it.
That 911 caller was never identified, but police eventually determined it was not related to Tamika's case.
You get a lot of calls, most of which turn out to be either innocently mistaken or crank calls.
Someone had reached out to me and said that they were a psychic and they could provide me with information where Tamika was. And all I needed to do was Western Union them.
And you did?
I did.
Just out of desperation?
Just out of desperation. And he gave me this ridiculous story of, that she was being held against her will, and just very vague information. In hindsight, I know better.
That's the downside of publicity. There are lots of crank calls. The upside is you get some really, really good information.
In fact, there were those who truly wanted to help the family. Like Elaine Painter, a local Spartanburg woman who says she sometimes has visions about people.
Come back to me.
My husband was leaving for work. He brought the newspaper in and laid it on the kitchen table.
Come back to me.
He said, this beautiful girl's missing. She's a young girl, we need to pray for her. So I looked at the picture and she had this captivating smile and these beautiful eyes.
Come back to me.
And I moved the paper over and I just put my hand on her face and I prayed that they would find her alive.
Come back to me.
I just pray a lot. I'm not a psychic, I don't read cards. I saw this vision of someone looking through this woods or these bushes. And I knew it was connected to Tamika.
Come home.
Elaine felt her vision was too powerful to ignore, so she calls police.
We have that quite a bit. On major cases, people feel like they know some information in some fashion or form. We listen to everyone who contacts us. We rode around a few places and she knew some things about some areas that we've had major crime scenes.
They stopped by this lake. He said, do you think she could be in the lake? I said, no, she's not in the lake. You won't find her body in water anywhere. He said, do you think she was shot? And I said, no, she wasn't shot. There was a lot of blood. I guess I thought I was just gonna ride over there and I was gonna see this guy looking through some bushes and say, okay, case solved. But I would go back home crying every time because I thought God sent me to find her. I couldn't, so what am I doing? I'm wasting their time.
Miss Painter was very humble, amazing lady, was just trying to help out in the case. And I wanted to listen to her.
Police are actually open to Elaine's help. And months later, she goes on another ride along with them after she says she has a new and very specific vision.
I could see blood, her crumbled body on the left side of the closet.
A closet? Police aren't sure what to make of this.
I can't stop searching.
But they do know that time is of the essence, and Tamika's aunt Rebecca is doing everything she can to push for more public attention. You're a PR exec. Your husband's an NFL player. If anybody should be able to attract attention, I would think it would be the two of you.
Yeah,
But yet you're struggling to get the message out.
Right. I was used to the media being, enthralled with these stories. I assumed that I was going to be able to get that sort of attention for Tamika, and I could not have been more wrong.
It's hard to beat the media for getting a face out there. Whatever leads it could generate, that's what she was after.
I need all eyes looking for her. Anything that anyone I could reach out to, I was.
While Tamika's case did get local news coverage, Rebecca noticed that some other missing women were getting widespread national attention.
27-year-old Lori Hacking went for her morning jog and never returned.
Tamika was missing, actively missing. I had no leads on where she was, that it was pretty devastating to see Lori Hacking's case become a national story really overnight.
And you're being met with silence.
Yeah.
How frustrating was that?
Extremely frustrating.
But her persistence pays off. Tamika's case is now getting noticed by John Walsh's America's Most Wanted.
Tamika Houston is a young woman who disappeared down in South Carolina.
Will the spotlight on her case now lead to finding Tamika?
As the seasons changed, Rebecca continued to use her PR skills to advocate for Tamika. She focused her attention on Fox's Saturday evening primetime hit, America's Most Wanted.
You had gone to America's Most Wanted.
Yeah. I got the attention of a young associate producer at the time, Tiffany Cross, who said that she was drawn to the story because Tamika looked like her.
Her case file had kind of made it through a lot of producers and landed on my desk. And as soon as I read the story and I just looked through the notes and I talked to her aunt, Rebecca Howard, this was a story I knew I could own.
Tiffany advocated for our stories. It was officially greenlit. And that October, Tiffany was off to Spartanburg.
I just wanted to get on ground and understand who the people in this community were and what they could tell me about Tamika.
When you're thinking about national publicity, America's Most Wanted, why did that matter?
Brands. Brands matter. That's a top shelf brand. But also that means that they have the audience. The audience is looking. It gives them assurance that maybe if they think they know something, that they should call it in. And that's huge.
Tom Morris, America's Most Wanted.
The unique thing about America's Most Wanted is we worked alongside law enforcement. The first person I met in law enforcement on Tamika's story was Detective Steve Lamb.
All the leads that we've chased down have run into basically a dead end. I think they helped with the case, putting it out on a national level.
Steve Lamb seemed very dedicated to finding out what happened to Tamika.
We started just building flow charts of family and friends and people that she had dated or had relationships with, and we started seeking out all those individuals to communicate with them.
One name that kept coming up routinely when I got on site was Terrance.
The community and the family felt like Terrance was a person of interest in the case.
Terrance says he expected police to suspect him, but not his own family, especially an aunt who helped raise him.
So I asked her, why haven't you gotten with me and called me and prayed with me? She looked me in my face and she said, we thought you did it.
That must have hurt.
I told my heart out my chest.
Terrance was very offended that people thought he had something to do with Tamika's disappearance. I told Terrance we wanted to speak with him. I armed our reporter with tiny lipstick cameras, and we set off in a car behind him and sent him to talk to Terrance.
You're telling me you did not have anything to do with it, correct?
Exactly.
At one point, he even got down on his knees, talking to our reporter, trying to plead that he did not do this.
Why do you agree to talk to America's Most Wanted?
I wanted the story to get out. I'm thinking like, okay, America's Most Wanted, They're stable, they have good researchers, they have good, but y'all come with this, so I'm like, y'all didn't come to help find her. You came to get a confession. You're wasting time.
Of course, you always look to boyfriends, but if there's nothing there, at a certain point you have to move on.
Over time, we felt like that he was not involved in her disappearance.
One thing that I've always thought about Tamika, and I always wanted people to know, is that she was a very spiritual person. Tamika knew that she would not live long.
We talked about her not being here at 25.
You talked about her not being alive?
Yes.
What do you mean?
She knew that something tragic was gonna happen to her.
You're saying she didn't think she was going to live long?
No, she knew. I didn't say think. She knew she wasn't gonna live to be 25. Knew. We had these conversations.
Spartanburg detectives with the America's Most Wanted team in tow are now focusing on those keys found in Tamika's car.
They told us about it, and then we filmed them finding the keys.
Matching the key was basically finding a needle in a haystack.
And it's that key that begins to unlock the mystery into Tamika's disappearance.
We're able to trace it back to an apartment complex. But even then, the odyssey was just beginning.
We go through with management, knocking on the door.
Detectives go from door to door before making a shocking discovery.
Investigators found a really big bleach stain, which is Latin for I'm covering something up.
In the very beginning, where does this investigation take you? Are you getting any leads?
People knew that Tamika had gone missing.
Was that a real moment for you in this investigation? The key unlocks the door?
I thought we made something like this. Saying on TV, but not in real life.
That was the key piece of evidence that they needed to figure out what exactly happened to Tamika, and that was just the beginning.
People had seen her here.
Yes, had seen her and thought that she had dated someone.
Entering apartment 215, Fremont Apartments.
The investigators found a really big bleach stain, which is Latin for I'm covering something up.
And his explanation for the stain was that it was
red Kool-Aid.
Red Kool-Aid.
Which is amazing in a way, because this leads to the discovery, which leads them right here.
I thought you had to be a monster.
You said that this case touched you like no other had. Why?
Because I know how much black girls don't matter.
There's a woman out there who's helpless, and we don't know what happened to her.
Family members say Tamika would never leave her pet home alone.
The weeks turn into months. The search goes on.
Yeah.
No sign of Tamika.
I still had so much hope that she's gonna pop up. She's gonna pop up.
Tamika's black Honda CRX was found here at the Barksdale apartment complex, but there was no sign of a struggle, no blood, no Tamika.
They find Tamika's car, and then they find these keys. What did you learn about those keys?
I look at keys all the time, and I never think about what's on them. Sometimes there are things that identify them. You think that that's just the key brand, but it turns out that the key maker had a code. AA14. That's the number on the keys that they found in the car.
And they weren't Tamika's keys?
No, they weren't. But that code was important. Fate must have been on Lieutenant Lamb's side that day as he stepped into one of the local key shops. Well, fate and fate.
We just decided to go to a local locksmith who had been here for decades and show him the keys to see if he had any ideas. And one of the keys had a stamp, and it was a code that he recognized that he had created.
It was crazy. Again, AA14, it told him that he made the key, but also through his files, suddenly, boom, he can tell you where those keys fit.
When this particular key was brought to us, we knew it was a housing authority key, so we then cross-referenced it, and we saw the AA14 matched the Fremont school apartment.
That code told him that it was made for the Fremont school apartments.
Which is amazing in a way, because this leads to the discovery which leads them right here. How do you even begin to figure out where these keys go to here?
Oh, we just went to management and told them what we were doing, and we were allowed to try the keys.
With Tamika missing and the clock ticking, the question is, could she be held inside that apartment complex?
We tried every single apartment, and the last one opened.
Was that a real moment for you in this investigation? You finally, the key unlocks a door?
Yes, it was. I mean, it was great for us. I think it was one of the turning points in the case.
It opens like a storage room. And as it turns out, when somebody moves out in those apartments, they just swap locks from an apartment that's empty or another room, and they just swap the locks between the two rooms, and they keep no record of it.
When he tried the keys and the door opened, that was the key piece of evidence that they needed to figure out what exactly happened to Tamika, and that was just the beginning.
It didn't fit an active apartment, but at least we knew we were in the right apartment complex at that point.
We processed it just to make sure she was not being held down there, but it turned into nothing.
And had Tamika had any connection to this apartment building, that, as far as you knew?
Loosely, we thought, but we didn't have anything for sure. But now, once we started talking to people in the apartment complex and things, people began to know who she was.
People had seen her here?
Yes, had seen her and thought that she had dated somebody named Chris that lived here.
Tamika's best friend, Zelda, had actually met Chris, but only one time, the last time she saw Tamika.
She knocked on the door, and she had a guy with her, and they came in, and she was like, "Hey, Zelda, this is my friend Chris." And I was like, "Hey, Chris," and he was kind of standoffish. I'm like, "Where did he come from?" She was like, "Oh, he's just my friend." His demeanor was really odd. I'm like, who is this guy?
Chris Hampton was another boyfriend of Tamika's, and he had a little bit of a record.
He was out on a bank robbery, on some probation.
He had actually called the FBI when they were working that bank robbery, saying he hadn't done it, that it wasn't him, and but they were already showing his pictures.
What had you known about Chris Hampton? Anything?
Nothing. From my understanding, he was relatively a new person kind of in her universe. I was her aunt. We did have a very sisterly relationship, but I think she would look to me for approval. If she just met somebody that she wasn't really sure about, like by the time that she lets me know that she's dating someone, it would be more of a serious type of relationship. So I had no clue whatsoever that she even knew this person.
He was one of the people she had dated in the past that we put on the list that we were trying to contact and interview.
We determined at some point that Christopher Hampton had been a tenant in an apartment there at Fremont Apartments. So he very much became a person of interest.
Detectives begin talking with Christopher Hampton, who tells them that the last time he saw Tamika, she wanted to borrow money before heading to Myrtle Beach for Bike Week back in May.
I was assigned as an FBI special agent to the Tamika Houston matter. We had information that we wanted to confront Christopher Hampton with to see whether he could validate that information, whether he would cooperate with questioning.
And you don't remember when you let her borrow that money? Like I said, I told you last time, it was like a couple of days before Bike Week started.
Did you see her at any point after that?
Nah, that was the last time I seen her.
He was wanting to be helpful and was trying to give the last information that he remembered when he last saw her.
This was your girlfriend? Nah, we just, she was one of the girls I was messing with.
He shared that he had a girlfriend that was pregnant. And so that becomes a point of confrontation in these interviews. Is Tamika aware of this? How does she feel about that?
But she know that I had a baby on the way and she respected it. My baby mama. She respected it.
Do you have anything to do with her disappearance?
No. Okay. I don't know nothing about it. She was one person I messed with, and I hate, you know, she missing or whatever, but, you know, I got a life to live. I never thought I'd be in the middle of something like this. Saying on TV, but, you know, not in the real life.
I've got a mother and a father and an entire family that doesn't know what happened to this little girl.
Yeah, but, you know, and I guarantee nothing happened to her. What if she come back, you know? That's right. Christmas time.
While police have no evidence on Christopher Hampton, they want to keep him talking. Then a letter written on Christmas Eve offers detectives a gift they weren't expecting. What's inside would break this case wide open.
And instantly, I knew, why is this guy telling us he rented a carpet cleaner?
As the seasons change and the months go by, Tamika's family marks a heartbreaking milestone, her 25th birthday. And on Christmas Eve 2004, Christopher Hampton writes a curious letter to law enforcement.
So Mr. Hampton addressed a letter to myself on December 24th. He says in the letter, I went to my apartment and found that somebody had come into my apartment and poured beer on my floor, smeared mayo, ketchup, hot sauce, flour, and all kinds of other stuff all over my bedroom floor.
And in this letter, he talked about he had rented a carpet cleaner. And instantly, I knew, why is this guy telling us he rented a carpet cleaner? He's telling us this because he thinks we know something that we don't know.
He goes on to say, I saw Tamika last the day before I rented the cleaner.
We felt that was very unusual for someone to write a letter to law enforcement about unusual damage in their apartment and ring a steam cleaner, you know, right after the last time they saw someone missing.
I remember Steve bringing me the letter, and my thought is, we have a missing young woman that you were connected with, and you want us to believe it's ketchup? Keep talking, keep writing.
That letter raises suspicions about what might have happened in Hampton's old Fremont apartment, so detectives check it out. Which apartment then?
Far corner.
Back here?
Far corner, top apartment.
We didn't have a warrant. The lady opened the door, let us in. We didn't tell her why we were there, but other than trying to investigate a crime.
The investigators found a really big bleach stain, which is Latin for I'm covering something up.
We felt like there was enough to execute a search warrant at that prior apartment he lived in.
Entering apartment 215, Fremont Apartments. When we were processing Chris's apartment, we would walk through doing a videotape documenting what it looked like before and after. Straight across the hall is their first bedroom.
We used Blue Star to spray on the carpet, and you spray in the dark, and if there's human blood there, it will illuminate, and it hit in his bedroom area and in his closet area.
Blood was found underneath the carpet. Once we pulled the carpet up, there was large amounts of blood. It soaked through the carpet and was just on the floor, and a lot in the closet.
You find blood in the apartment?
Yes.
But is it Tamika's blood?
We didn't know at that time, but eventually we did. Over the course of a few days, we linked DNA back to her.
With this latest development, Tamika's family now is struggling to keep hope alive. When you find out that there is blood in this apartment, what goes through you?
At that point, I was I resigned at that point.
In your gut, you know?
I felt up until that point I had a lot of hope, but I think that's when I knew that we weren't going to see her again.
That same day, Lieutenant Lamb gets an unexpected call from Elaine Painter, the woman who said she had visions about Tamika's case.
The night that we found the blood in the apartment, she called me on the phone and said she knew something good was happening in the case. And there's no way she could have known that.
Tamika's blood had been found in a closet, just like Elaine Painter says she had seen in her vision months earlier. Police would later take her inside that apartment.
And we walked up these steps and they opened the door and I saw a closet. And I knew that was where she died.
There's potentially a big break this morning in the case of a missing 24-year-old woman who disappeared last year. Investigators now say they found blood in a former apartment of a person that they've been questioning.
This is a video of the first interview that I had done with Chris. This is shortly after the blood was found in his apartment. What's that look like to you, Chris?
Some kind of stain, like.
Mm-hmm. It is. That's underneath the carpet in your room.
What kind of stain?
That's blood. See this letter right here that you wrote?
Mm-hmm.
In that letter you talk about cleaning the floor, all right? And what this is a crime scene.
Yeah, I don't know about it.
When I interviewed him, he was uncooperative. He didn't want to acknowledge anything. Whatever happened to Tamika happened right there in your apartment.
Yeah, I don't believe that.
Listen to me. I don't care if you believe it or not, I'm telling you, all right?
No, my candy apartment had all kind of damn flour and stuff on my floor, like beer. People pour beer on the floor or something. All kind of like ketchup and stuff like that. No, I ain't got nothing. I ain't with that.
He doesn't want to accept the facts for what they are, that this is blood residue, this is not a kitchen condiment.
Well, her blood is all over your floor.
How you know it's her blood? It could be anybody's blood.
No, it can't be anybody's blood. How long you think we've been doing this? You don't know that we can tell one person's blood from another blood?
I doubt it.
You ever heard of DNA?
Yeah.
I'm telling you the girl died in your apartment. I'm not wishy-washing around there. I'm telling you that. That's a fact. Watching that now, one reason I would chuckle is the fact that I know I'm lying to him at that point. We didn't know for sure that that was Tamika's blood. We believed it, but we didn't know it.
We're trying to press him to produce Tamika's body.
You're willing to weigh this whole charge yourself?
If I have to, because I don't know what's going on. He kind of locked me up just to solve your case of.
I'm not looking for a body to hang this charge on. I'm looking for Tamika's body.
The solicitor's office didn't want us to charge him until we had the body. At that time, I don't think we had ever tried a no-body case. If you don't have a body, it's definitely not a slam dunk.
Yeah, I was the circuit solicitor, which everyone else calls district attorney. The goal is not an arrest, the goal is a conviction.
So we're trying to identify him as the killer.
Then, unexpectedly, somebody else surfaces, saying she too had been in Hampton's apartment.
There was no reason why she should be in that room.
Tom Morris has the story of a young woman with a big voice and a big heart. She may have followed her heart into some big trouble.
Tamika Houston has been missing for 10 months when the America's Most Wanted segment airs.
We decided to come to Spartanburg to see what AMW could do to get some answers for Tamika's family.
The tenant had cleaned up what he thought was ketchup. Crime lab techs went to work, and they didn't find ketchup. It was Tamika's blood.
America's Most Wanted was this show that was interactive.
We'd love to hear from you. You can call 1-800-CRIME-TV, ask for me or the detectives.
People would watch the show on Saturday night in real time, and anyone could call in with a tip.
And where are you located?
The show's got a hotline in their studio in Washington, D.C.
Can you describe it?
Where trained employees and law enforcement are at the ready in case a lead comes in.
America's Most Wanted.
My name's Steve Lamb. I'm from South Carolina.
We would have cameras there. You would even cover law enforcement walking around from phone to phone. And sometimes they'd say, hey, I have something. And you would give the phone to the detective, and they could talk to the person.
America's Most Wanted. We'll pass this information along.
Lieutenant Lamb said they waited, and calls started to come in. And somewhere near around midnight, they got a call from a young woman.
Someone here locally who felt they may know some information.
You move the dresser.
She is a young juvenile that had a relationship with Hampton and had went over to his residence close to the crime scene time and had been with him that evening.
Said they go back into his bedroom. She said that he spilled Kool-Aid in the floor.
I got an investigator here locally in Spartanburg to meet that individual that night.
She knows exactly where that stain is.
That kind of helps seal up some information in reference to the case.
The caller is just 15 years old, Police bring her in and interview her on camera. This is the first time that video is being shown publicly. We blurred her and altered her voice.
When I looked at the show tonight, the America's Most Wanted, they said they was talking. They said that whoever it was said that it was ketchup. That stain did not look like no ketchup. It looked like that was liquid that had been poured. It looked like it was coming from the closet.
She said the dresser was pulled in front of the closet door. She knew something that we had not released.
We had no further evidence pointing to where Tamika might be. And the fact that this 15-year-old girl made a link, a connection between blood on this person's floor in his apartment was interesting to us.
And he didn't have no cover on his bed. It was just a brand new bed.
She had visited his apartment and he had what appeared to be a stain that could possibly have been blood, but he tried to explain it away.
And his explanation for the stain was that it was
red Kool-Aid.
Red Kool-Aid.
That's what he told me.
I get goosebumps. There was no reason why she should be in that room. In a way, you're grateful, but then again, you're horrified.
The witness is implicating Christopher Hampton at the crime scene and calling into question his explanation about that carpet stain.
I knew at that point they were zeroing in on him.
National media coverage matters in missing persons cases. It's not just any coverage, it's primetime coverage. Because although it may take a village to raise a child, more often than not, it takes a nation to find a missing child, or anybody for that matter.
In the early 2000s, there was a lot of missing white women that got outsized attention. And it was very frustrating to be a Black woman working in newsrooms and seeing how different stories stayed on television consistently.
I was like, listen, you guys are ignoring Black women at their expense. In this country, we have 40% of missing persons cases are persons of color. Why is it when you turn on your television, you only see white faces?
Tomorrow marks 1 week since 18-year-old Natalie Holloway vanished on the last day of her senior class trip.
I was reporting on that case in Aruba, yet I had not heard of Tamika Houston.
Right. You're reporting on Natalie Holloway, and you're a Black woman and don't know about it.
Like other reporters, I too was covering all kinds of stories, often about missing people, women in particular, not realizing some of the people who weren't being covered. What did you hear back when you said, it seems that you're ignoring Black women?
There's an ABC News reporter who did write a story about the disparity in which missing Black women versus missing white women are handled by media. That was the first bite that I got.
Why did it matter that she didn't make front page news?
That's the gold standard. A national conversation about a missing person is the difference between sometime not only being found, but never being forgotten.
It's just hard and very devastating for me. Everything I'm hearing, it's not good, so of course it's killing me.
She's not out there. If something has happened to my daughter, I just want to put her to rest.
While Tamika's parents are grieving, Christopher Hampton, in custody for violating his parole for that bank robbery, is busy making calls from jail.
Hello, this is a collect call from?
Correct. Like this one to an ex-girlfriend.
But it was a piece of paper in there, and they had one of your yellow notebook things. Mm-hmm. And they had fingerprints and blood on it.
I don't know what it was.
She contacted us and said she had some belongings of Hampton's.
Christopher Hampton's ex-girlfriend turned in his wallet.
Lieutenant Lamb was going through it and found a drop of blood on a photograph in the wallet.
There was some smudge marks that looked like blood and a partial print. We do the testing on it as Tamika's blood.
At this point, that was enough to convince the solicitor's office to go ahead and let us charge him.
You have her blood in his wallet. You have her blood on the floor of an apartment that he used to live in. It's no longer a question of who did it. It is now a question of what happened.
There was still the outstanding question of, well, then where was Tamika? What happened to her? And only Chris Hampton had those answers.
It's been 15 months since Tamika Houston's disappearance. Now, armed with hard evidence, Solicitor Trey Gowdy is ready to have police arrest Christopher Hampton for Tamika's murder.
I remember talking to them about you need to be there when he's released. When they picked him up, what you really want is you want answers for the family. Where's the body?
He was scheduled to be released on his parole violation, and they assured me, listen, we're going to be there to pick him up, and we're bringing him in to question him.
You're about to see potentially a resolution here. Somebody's about to be arrested.
It's really a tough situation to be in because you just like, until you know, there is kind of maybe that small sliver of hope that one day she'll just walk through that door.
Because there's no body at this point.
Yeah, exactly. So it's tough. It's, you want to know, but then you don't want to know.
We made arrangements the morning that he's released that we would be there, and over the course of our ride back, he was nervous that we were going to put him in front of cameras. So we went to another location. We got cheeseburgers from a local restaurant, and I made sure that we asked for a ketchup bottle, not to little packs, we want a bottle. We were sitting there talking, and the ketchup bottle's on the corner of the table, and I said, don't knock that off in the floor. And he kind of laughed about it, or snickered about it. And I think that was kind of the turning point for him. He stood up, and he said, let's go. And I said, where do you want to go? And originally I thought he meant to jail, but he said, I'll take you to where she's at.
My God, Tamika, is this where fate, faith, and fortune unfortunately meet? Have we finally found you?
How did you handle that news that he was going to lead police to her body?
Major Lamb, I remember him calling me and saying that he finally said that he was going to lead them to Tamika. I said, okay, I'm on the next flight there.
When I got the phone call, I think I just lost it. Yeah, it was tough.
It was just me and my dad when we found out. And I just remember him like screaming to the top of his lungs. And then that's when I knew like my sister was never coming back.
We get in our vehicles, and he drives us across town, up the interstate, into another small town outside of our jurisdiction.
Miss Houston was found in a wooded area, good bit of brush and undergrowth in the area, but some clearings as well.
We get out of the vehicle, we walk probably 100 yards into the woods, and he points out where it is.
Like the X, right?
It turns out Hampton had made a cross with tree branches and laid them on top of the makeshift grave where he'd buried Tamika.
As if I'm gonna fashion a cross and put it there is somehow gonna mitigate what he's done.
Miss Houston was buried in a shallow grave, and some of the remains of Mrs. Houston had been scattered about the area.
Right here. There were a couple bones on the surface that they saw at that time, and it was in Spartanburg County.
Multiple law enforcement agencies were at the scene.
When I arrived that night, they're still processing that scene and trying to collect her remains. It was gut-wrenching at that point. You just know, you felt so remote, and you felt like, it's like she's been out here alone for all this time. You feel really helpless.
I open my arms for your embrace, but all I feel is empty space.
I remember walking down into deep woods. And I mean, by this time, we're surrounded by trees.
So come back to me. Come back to me.
Watching the pain on my sister's face, it felt like she was in physical pain. It was really just difficult to see her going through that.
And I'm standing there and my eyes are full of tears. And I remember looking down because I felt like I was stepping on something. And I reached down and picked it up. And it was actually one of her bones.
The family came and found a couple bones that had not been picked up. And so for me, that was a really sad situation. So I told them I'd just do it myself.
That part of it. Excuse me. It was supposed to be, cleared first before we even got there.
And yet, through it all, something extraordinary starts to happen. The family begins their long goodbye, and quite naturally, in this unholy yet sacred setting, an impromptu ceremony develops at the site.
The family had put up a little cross and flowers there at the gravesite.
You had hoped it would be a different outcome. You do have an answer now, but it's certainly not the answer you wanted.
It wasn't the answer we wanted. It's such a loss. Like, I miss her so much.
But how did Tamika end up dead, and why? Christopher Hampton, back in an interview room, is ready to confess.
I know. You have to bail, I snapped my
This makeshift gravesite deep in this wooded area near Tiger River is where Spartanburg investigators say Christopher Hampton led them.
Deep into the brush, investigators say Hampton showed them where he dumped Tamika's body.
Just recently identified after a long, grueling investigation.
After Christopher Hampton leads authorities to Tamika's remains, he then sits down to tell investigators what he says happened the day Tamika died.
We returned back to the police department to interview him in reference to the case.
He tells a story of an argument over money, and he's ironing clothes for work.
Kind of tell me what happened. She wanted to borrow the money, so I said, I ain't got it right now. I said, I got a ticket coming up, I got to pay. I said, and plus, my baby, she gonna be born, I gotta buy some stuff for her. Okay. Tell me what happened. And she got mad. She said, well, God, she said, you always talk about that baby. You making the money, you give me some money now. She yap. She stood up and I'm saying she went to argue. She was like, yap. So I just. What happened? I just trying to turn down.
They have a little disagreement, and he turns around and hits her with the iron.
It happened so bad, I snapped, man.
Turn all the way around and show me, so I understand which side we take.
It had probably.
On this side.
Right, that's all we had.
Based on the crime scene, detectives aren't sure about Hampton's story.
I think there was considerably more damage than what probably would have been caused by just getting hit in the head with an iron.
Did you go check her, or did you just?
I panicked, man. I got up out of there.
You panicked and left.
I got up out of there.
When you heard about Chris's confession, when you heard him say that he killed her,
I was really angry. It seemed so violent and so senseless.
He said it hit her, and he didn't know what to do, and then left and came back.
He felt like, she'd be up and gone when she wasn't. So he panicked and wrapped her up in a comforter off the bed and put her in the closet.
He had such little regard for her life that he dragged her in the closet and moved a dresser in front of the closet. It was almost like he wanted it out of sight, out of mind. It didn't happen.
Yeah, I'm scared, so I put in the clothes and stuff. Put the thing over the thing, got the dress over the door.
Hampton tells them he places a dresser in front of the closet door, just as the 15-year-old witness had described to police.
You're dealing with the psychology of someone who could take a life and then be with this underage girl, and this body is in the closet the entire time.
He said he wrapped the body up in his bedding and carried her out to the car.
He goes to Walmart and buys a shovel. The sun's coming up, and he decides to drive down this dirt road, take her in the woods, and he digs a grave.
Okay, what do you do next?
Got buried in there. He put dirt back on top of him.
Put her out in the woods, buried her in the woods.
Horrific.
Did you put anything else on top of it?
Made a cross with it. Like with the tree, like a cross.
Was you doing that just as like a burial for her or something, or why'd you do that? I mean, that's.
I guess because I'm sorry, I didn't mean to do it.
He is confessing to a homicide, and his intent is to make the event sound as unintentional as possible. And we didn't believe that to be true because he'd gone to great effort to dispose of Miss Houston's body.
Months later, he returns to that gravesite, removes some bones, as well as Tamika's skull, and takes that and disposes of it at another location.
This is a diagram that I made after we had finished processing the scene. And this shape in the middle is the burial site. One of the most interesting things on this, to me, is this is a fence. And you have this creek right here. What I think actually happened was because her jawbone, was the only bone that was found on the other side of this fence, I think he likely took the skull, like he said. She couldn't be identified, or to cover up some kind of horrific damage to it, and threw it in this creek.
I just kind of thought that you had to be a monster to do something like that to someone after a period of time.
Tamika's life reduced to a pile of bones, picked, plucked, and spread apart by animals, weather, and worry. Gone, missing, now found.
Christopher Hampton placing Tamika's body in the woods. The vision Elaine Painter says she had, spot on.
That was who I saw looking through these bushes.
And it seems Tamika had one more message to share via Elaine.
When I was very, very early in my pregnancy, and literally the only people who knew that I was pregnant with twins was me, my doctor, and my husband. Elaine called me, and I had a couple of miscarriages previously, and she's like, "Oh, Rebecca," and I could tell she was struggling a bit. She says, "Yeah, I'm seeing Tamika, and I keep seeing her, and she's holding these 2 blue bundles," and I'm like, "Really?"
I said, "I don't have any idea what this means." I did not know that she was pregnant with twins. Maybe God was saying that it's going to be okay, that you're going to get to keep these.
I was just blown away because, I mean, again, and I knew what the sex would be of my twins.
Twin boys?
Yeah, twin boys. And 2 blue bundles. And to this day, I always feel like Tamika, she's watching them, and she's around.
With the sound of the song, Some Way, Somehow, a memorial service for Tamika is held in South Carolina.
These people gathered here at Foster Chapel Baptist Church in her honor.
Tamika Houston is later buried in Fairfax, Virginia, just a few miles from her mother's home.
I was so confused on why she had a closed casket. I was really confused. I'm like, I want to see my sister. And that's when my mom, she kind of explained it to me, it's not much in the casket.
Christopher Hampton is finally headed to trial, but there's a turn of events in the courtroom.
I was shocked.
And on the 20th anniversary of Tamika's death, her Aunt Rebecca gets a welcome surprise. Nearly 2 years after Tamika Houston went missing, her former love interest, Christopher Hampton, is heading to trial.
It felt like it was going to be, a really tough couple of weeks in Spartanburg. But on the first day of trial, he ends up pleading guilty. I was shocked.
Are you guilty of the crime of murder?
Yes, sir. I don't know why he pled guilty. He wound up getting the exact same sentence that he would have gotten had he gone to trial and lost.
Mr. Hampton, the sentence of the court is that you be committed to the State Department of Corrections for life.
I was really emotional that day, and he really didn't show any remorse.
Life without parole.
If anyone deserved life, it had to be Christopher Hampton.
To this day, those who knew and loved Tamika still wonder about the motive for her murder. Hampton says she was upset that he was saving money for his unborn child.
She wasn't like that. She wasn't, those are your children. No, those are our children. That's how she was. That's why his story doesn't make any sense.
My sister she cared a lot. I couldn't imagine her saying that at all.
I don't know if I'll ever get the true story of what happened. So I'm trying to learn to just come to just be at peace with it.
Her family was just beginning to accept a dark new reality. Life without Tamika.
You said that this case touched you like no other had. Why?
Because I know how much Black girls don't matter. And I want to always be a reflection of how much value that they had to me.
What do you most want people to know about this woman that you loved?
With her death, I met so many women. I met so many fathers. I met so many sisters, brothers. They still haven't found their loved ones. So I know she's putting me on a higher mission.
The lack of media coverage about Tamika's case led to the creation of the Black and Missing Foundation. You advocate with the Black and Missing Foundation. Is it still a struggle to get the stories of women of color noticed?
It can be, but I think there is more of an awareness of it.
Is that Tamika's legacy?
I do believe that. I do.
On the 20th anniversary of Tamika's disappearance, we brought her best friend Zelda and her Aunt Rebecca together. They hadn't seen each other for years.
Zelda! Don't do that.
I'll try not to.
Honey, don't cry. I love you so much. Don't cry. It's so good to see you. You are the best friend ever.
I know.
You know that?
And she sung at the wedding. Oh, so beautiful.
I miss her.
I know.
He's a high, he's on, and I know he watches me.
It just makes me think about what my sister could have been. And it was just so unfair that her life got snatched from her.
What a deeply moving report tonight, Deborah. A quick note here. 2020 did reach out to Christopher Hampton for comment. He did not respond.
So far, David, his appeals have been denied. For more on this case, you can listen to Erica Alexander's Audible original series, Finding Tamika. It's available now. That's our program for tonight. Thanks so much for watching. I'm Deborah Roberts.
And I'm David Muir. From all of us here at 2020 and ABC News, Good night.
Nikki was not answering the door, was not answering the phone.
When she doesn't appear, people are surprised. She's usually very reliable.
I think it was just a shock because you don't expect that to sort of happen where you live.
Just unbelievable. It's like you're in a movie. It's not even happening to you.
Murder? What do you mean, murder?
When the police reviewed the CCTV footage, they saw a person entering the flats.
It's chilling. She's on her way to kill.
Letchworth, England's first garden city, is a rural town situated north of Hertfordshire.
Letchworth was founded by Ebenezer Howard at the start of the 20th century. He wanted people to move out of cramped conditions in places like London and come and live in the countryside.
Letchworth, for somewhere to live, is lovely, it's welcoming, it's rural, but within easy reach of both Cambridge and London. I'm getting older, but I still find it's a very safe place to walk around. I just feel it's a very comfy place to live.
I think people in Letchworth are really friendly. Often if you walk in, you know, they'll say hello.
Life in Letchworth is really good. Everybody's very friendly, can be very vibrant through the summer months. Very nice place.
Letchworth is a lovely place to live. Very quiet, very nice, no trouble at all. Wouldn't live anywhere else. Beautiful place.
And for 26-year-old carer Nikki Collingbourne, it was the perfect place to live and work while remaining nearby to her family.
We were like best friends, really. Not so much, we used to make a joke about her being my auntie because she was younger than me, but we were just like really close friends, like sisters, really, because we were of a similar age.
She always wanted children of her own, and I think that made her very childlike, but in a good way. And she worked with children as well, so.
Because she's so good with kids, like, amazing, like, just seeing family, anyone's children, even their friends' kids, she was brilliant with. So obviously as I started having my children, she became quite involved, and we'd often spend weekends together away, with kids, without kids. She was just such a kind person.
Nikki was very funny, caring and loving. Everything about her. She was just a wonderful person. She'd drop anything to do anything for anybody.
Nikki's close family circle depended on her in their daily lives, and that included helping her mum and taking her to and from hospital appointments. But all that was about to change.
Nikki's mother was very ill. She was being treated in the Lister Hospital in Stevenage, which is about 7 miles away. Nikki's due to collect her, and when she doesn't appear, people are surprised.
Nikki usually does all the running around, goes and picks her mum up, makes sure she's got everything, and she had not answered her calls, which was obviously very unlike Nikki.
Nikki would never let anybody down on an appointment, never, unless it was absolute emergency.
By the afternoon, I was a bit really worried, so I just sent her a text and I just said, Nikki, if you need me, I'm here, blah, blah, and yeah. And then the next thing I know, her mum had rung me and said, have you seen Nikki? She hasn't turned up to pick me up from hospital. And I instantly knew. I knew something was not right. I went down, the car was there, so I knew she was in the flat. Shouting through the letterbox, like Leanne stuff was shouting through the letterbox, no response. But I know that Nikki was very down and depressed about her mum being poorly, and she was really worried about what was going to happen to her. And sometimes Nikki was the type of person that does need to be just left alone for a little while. It's very unusual for her not to contact people. So I thought, you know what, we'll give it a night.
But the next day, there is still no word from Nikki.
She's usually very reliable. Her family trust her, they rely on her. So they're concerned. Her half-sister obtains a spare key to her flat and goes round with other members of the family.
With Nikki not responding, her family let themselves into the flat. But nothing could prepare them for what they would find.
They walked into the kitchen, and in front of them, they saw Nikki on the floor in a pool of blood. Her left wrist had been slit.
They found Nikki laying on the floor, her face up, with there was just like a massive congealed blood running from Nikki's head, and yeah, you could see that she was dead.
Family members went down to her flat to see if she was okay, and obviously discovered her body. At that point, they immediately called the police.
My daughter phoned me up hysterical, saying, Nikki's dead, there's blood everywhere. And I just went hysterical on the phone, and then I was in shock.
Police immediately arrive on the scene to be met by a gruesome sight.
In this case, the scene investigation officer will be looking to preserve that scene, preserving and securing evidence.
Nikki is laying on the floor of her kitchen, fragments of a ceramic chicken-shaped pot surrounding her. A severe cut is across her wrist. Could she have had an accident or taken her own life?
It was so bizarre, and there didn't seem to be any particular reason for it.
It was suspected that Nikki had took her own life, but I knew that that wasn't the case. She'd never done that. She loved life too much. She would never have left her mum and her family.
As Nikki's body is taken for a post-mortem, the tragic news travels fast through the close-knit community, alerting the local press to the scene.
When the police arrived, the area was cordoned off. There were police cars everywhere, officers in white suits from the forensic department carrying out checks. Local people at the shops and the flats were shocked by what had gone on.
It's not something you hear about in, you know, the area that you live. It's not something you expect on your doorstep.
She was so friendly with everybody around here. It was sad when we heard about what happened to her. She wouldn't hurt anybody. She was the most kindest person I'd ever known. It was devastating news.
When the post-mortem report comes in, the results are not clear-cut.
From the pathology reports, there's no one single injury that led to Nikki's death. It was inconclusive.
But the results do reveal Nikki's skull had been fractured. And it seems the broken ceramic chicken-shaped dish which had surrounded her body was involved.
So the pathologist said that the chicken dish would have been picked up by two hands and used with considerable force. Although it wasn't enough to fracture Nikki's skull, it certainly was enough to render her unconscious.
The police quickly realised that somebody else had been involved.
The pathologists have concluded that she died because of the violent actions of a third party.
No one could have predicted that this was going to happen. We just couldn't believe it. It was just so, it was like it wasn't even happening to us.
With the outcome from the post-mortem now in, the inquiry into Nikki's death changes focus. In Letchworth, results from the post-mortem on 26-year-old Nikki Collingbourne has changed the course of the investigation.
They walked into the kitchen, and in front of them, they saw Nikki on the floor in a pool of blood. Her left wrist had been slit.
Chicken dish would have been picked up by two hands and used with considerable force. It certainly was enough to render her unconscious.
With a murder investigation now underway, Police break the news to her grieving family.
I was at work. I got a phone call from my boyfriend at the time, and he just said, "You need to get home right now." He goes, "I can't really tell you anything I don't want to tell you right now." But I knew, and I was so panicky. When I got there, there was police everywhere. It was, yeah, not very good. And my children were there crying. My mum was there crying.
And I was like, murder? What do you mean, murder? I honestly didn't think, even in that moment, that it was murder.
Just unbelievable. It's like you're in a movie. It's not even happening to you. Yeah, everyone was just shocked, devastated.
News that Nikki's death is now being treated as a murder quickly spreads around the area.
When I first heard about the murder, I think it was just generally shock, because you don't expect that to sort of happen where you live.
I was really amazed, really surprised, because it's a really safe area, and it really shocked me.
It took a long, long time to take it in. We knew relatives who knew them, and so sorry for the family, you know.
With family and locals still trying to come to terms with the murder, the bigger question being asked is who would want to harm Nikki?
She works with children. That was just what she wanted to do for her whole life. Just work with children, be a mum, and, you know, she had a great relationship with everyone.
I loved everything about Nikki. Everything. She was just a beautiful person. There's nothing she wouldn't do for you. She'd cheer you up. She'd get you motivated, because I don't go out a lot. She'd come in, she'd do stuff for me. She's like the little sister I never had.
Her family was her life. And yeah, we saw her almost all the time. I'd open my door, my son would be gone into her house, and I wouldn't see him for days. Just to text her to make sure, is my son okay? And she's like, yeah, don't need to worry, he's here.
She literally brought so much joy to anybody that met her, really. She just kept us all together. She was the glue that kept both sides of the family together, really. She was just a really amazing, one of those people that you meet and you're like, wow, she was put on this earth just to care for people. She was just amazing.
I was honestly shocked when I found out who the victim was. So I honestly had no idea why anybody would want to harm her.
With no clues as to who would want to harm Nikki, forensic officers take a closer look at her flat, turning the block into a major crime scene.
Police officers in white suits were gathering vital forensic evidence. The whole scene had been cordoned off. It was a major crime in what was usually a quiet area.
A murderer will either leave something at the scene or take something away from the scene. So we're looking to preserve and secure that evidence. And that evidence will be DNA, fingerprints, blood, hair, fibres, etc. So that they're looking for the physical evidence. A forensic examination of the scene was carried out, and DNA, essentially blood, was found on the broken pieces of the chicken pot.
While the evidence is sent off to the laboratory for examination, further searching at Nikki's home uncovers something concerning.
A letter was found in Nikki's flat in which she'd written to her GP saying she was absolutely terrified.
The letter throws up more questions. Who could Nikki have been afraid of? And could this person be behind her untimely death?
Nikki, unfortunately, got a lot of threats, and Nikki was terrified. I've never, ever known anyone so absolutely terrified. I remember one night, she barricaded her door up.
Yeah, she was very withdrawn. She was just scared.
Police need to piece together Nikki's last known movements, including trying to ascertain whether anyone visited her.
There was no sign of a forced entry.
in the sense of, for example, the door having been levered or a broken window or anything of that kind. The only way that you could get to it, it was quite secure, was by entering the door to the common parts of the purpose-built block and then going up the stairs and onto the landing and approaching the door of Nicky's flat.
So when looking at a murder investigation, the priorities at the scene could be different for different murders. For example, a killer has to have got there and then gone away from the scene. So it could be fast track looking at the CCTV, it could be speaking to family members, or it could be house to house because somebody could have seen the killer leaving the scene.
All the entrance and the landing on the first floor were covered by CCTV cameras, and as it happens, the system had been recently improved, and once the police got access to the CCTV, they recovered a whole series of images of events occurring at the door of the flat between the Sunday evening when Nicky returned home and the Tuesday evening when members of her family finally let themselves in.
After accessing the CCTV footage, police spend hours trawling through the images.
When the police reviewed the CCTV footage, they saw a person entering the flats. That person was wearing a high-vis jacket.
The CCTV shows a figure in a ginger curly wig, large frame glasses, with a King Charles I beard and a high-vis jacket, lumbering along the corridor.
The person is seen entering the flats just before 8:30 a.m. on Monday the 23rd of May and leaving just before noon, corresponding with the pathologist's time of death.
That person immediately becomes a person of interest because of the time they entered and left the flats. But also the CCTV showed that that person went to Nicky's door.
Who is the person on CCTV wearing a high-vis? Could it be a workman or a boyfriend?
When you've got the CCTV, you don't know who that is. However, you look into the victim and their background, and if you find out how a victim lived, you may find out how they died.
She didn't have a boyfriend, she was waiting for that one special person.
With police still at a loss, they turned to those close to Nicky.
The police called me up and asked me to go into the station to help them with something. But after I got off the phone to them, I was like, a bit like, well, I was the last person to see Nicky. Like, all these thoughts were, you don't even think you're going to think like that, but all these thoughts were running through my mind. I thought, I was the last person to see her, I was the last person to talk to her. What if they think it was me?
Me and Jodie had been called up on the Thursday or Friday by the police at the headquarters in Welling, and they said, oh, would you and Jodie, we want just you and Jodie to come and view some pictures for us. And we were like, oh, okay. And we were like, well, we don't really know anyone around here. We only know our family, so I don't know what we're going to find. Like, we just didn't know what we was going to expect.
So me and obviously Leanne drove there, and we got there and they separated us both. And they basically took Leanne into a room, and then took me into a room, and I didn't quite know what I was here to do. And they just like, we need to show you some CCTV images. Just say what you think, if you know the person, say.
And we kind of sat in this room and had a camera on us. I filmed the whole thing of me watching video footage of someone in a high-vis.
I honestly felt like passing out when I see it, like within 3 seconds of watching the clip. I actually had to stop halfway through watching it. I was in such shock. I was crying, screaming, I couldn't believe it, I couldn't believe it.
And I was like, I don't even think that's a man. I think that's a female dressing up as a man. I knew straight away that Jodie was going to identify her.
I just knew that it was a Ron.
The murder investigation into the death of Nicky Collingbourne has thrown up a suspect. a man seen entering Nikki's flat at the time of her death. But when CCTV is examined closely, family members recognize the person. And it's not a man.
When I see that first image of her dressed up the way she was, it just all hit me. Just knew that it was Yvonne.
But who is Yvonne?
So Nikki and Yvonne were sisters. There's a big age gap between them, about 27 years.
I first met Yvonne when I was dating her brother Paul, who obviously I later married, and we became friends. We used to go to the pub. Yvonne went to live in America, and basically I didn't have anything to do with Yvonne for years. She was estranged from the family.
Having moved to the US in the early 1990s, and due to their age gap, Yvonne and Nikki had not grown up together. But keen to get to know her half-sister, Nikki moved to America.
I did meet her when I went to America a couple of times. I kind of had my reservations about her, and she's quite in your face when she talks. She makes everything about her. She's quite manipulative.
She was quite boisterous. She would certainly punch you if she wouldn't think twice about it.
Despite the family's reservations, in 2015, when Yvonne came to visit family in the UK from the US, Nikki repaid the favour, letting her sister move in with her.
Everyone was just shocked to see her back in the UK, but at first we were happy to see her because she's part of the family.
The pair living together came as a surprise to family, since Nikki had shared something with them on her return to the UK.
Yvonne and Nikki's relationship was very strained when she came back because they'd had a big fallout before Nikki came back. And then obviously Yvonne followed about, I think it was a year later, but Nikki forgave her and they made it up, and that's how she ended up living with Nikki.
With Yvonne Kaler having been identified as the person in the CCTV, and with her being deemed the last person to see Nikki, and therefore a suspect, police need to ascertain what could have gone wrong in their relationship.
I have no doubt in my mind that Yvonne was jealous of Nikki and their relationship that she had over the years with their dad.
Yvonne was very jealous of the relationship that Nikki had with their dad because she obviously lived in America and Nikki lived in England, and she grew up with her dad, and I suppose, you know, she was in with all of us lot, and Yvonne didn't have that relationship with us. We only had that over the internet.
Because obviously Nikki felt obliged to have Yvonne there because they were sisters, and Nikki was very much a family person. Yvonne definitely manipulated her and used the fact that they were sisters.
Nikki and Yvonne Kaler's relationship was anything other than tranquil. It was difficult and tempestuous.
But could this strained relationship between the half-sisters have led to Nikki's death? In order to piece the puzzle together, police need to ask some questions. So make a decision.
Yvonne Kaler was arrested on the 25th of May, 2016. Once we got the suspect in custody, and we believe that is the killer, the clock is ticking. So we've got to do everything we can to get enough evidence for the CPS to authorise a charge. Because certainly in this case, if Yvonne Kaler had been bailed, she was a risk to other people out there.
Because obviously they had Yvonne, they'd arrested her for Nikki's murder, but they had no evidence to hold her. They had this CCTV image, and DNA takes time to come back, so they couldn't actually hold her.
With Yvonne in custody, police trawl her mobile phone and laptop and discover she had been searching for flights.
The police discovered she was planning to drive to Spain and then fly out to the United States to meet her husband.
she was planning to flee the jurisdiction and fly back to America. Those arrangements had, as it were, begun in the immediate aftermath of Nikki Collingbourne's death.
She was a flight risk. We know she was planning to go back to the USA.
Her mobile phone revealed she'd even sent messages after news of Nikki's murder broke.
Yvonne Kayler was pretending to be as concerned and upset as every other member of Nikki's family. She sent a message to her husband in the United States saying, "Pray for Nikki, as I will."
While piecing together Yvonne's movements in the days leading up to Nikki's murder, further revelations come to light.
She had visited the costume shop where she acquired the wig and the disguise and the false beard the preceding week. So there'd been clearly an element of planning about all of this.
We believe she's planned this murder meticulously, so she's an extreme danger to the public out there.
Police build their evidence against Yvonne Kayler, but at this stage it's purely circumstantial. So the focus turns to questioning Yvonne while in custody.
Yvonne, do you recognise the person in that CCTV?
No, look, bow-legged, fat, bow-legged to me.
Even though it could be clear that the person on the CCTV is Yvonne, Yvonne is denying that that is her, and that is not enough on its own to convict somebody of murder.
It was almost like it was a joke. Like she had padded herself up with some sort of padding, and she had a high vis on, a moustache, it looked like she'd brought in a joke shop, a wig and a goatee. And it was the most surreal. I can't to this day even look at it, like, I literally can't believe the way she dressed up and how she thought she was going to get away with that, because you can clearly see that that is her.
When I heard that Yvonne had dressed up to get into the flat, I was just gobsmacked. Never have even thought of anything like that.
Well, I couldn't tell if it was a fake beard.
Do you own a fake beard?
No, I don't own a fake beard.
Do you own a fake wig?
No, I don't own a fake wig.
By denying her presence on the CCTV, Yvonne was trying to achieve the smoke and mirrors that she'd of her plan. She wanted the police to believe that this was a man, and in fact, in her police interview, she tells the police officer that she thought it was a man who was bow-legged. Again, this was just part of her callous plan.
I'm fat, but I'm not bow-legged. I look like a man to me. I couldn't see his face.
What do you think looked like a man?
Just what they're wearing looked like a dude.
Then there is a breakthrough in the case. Results have come back from the forensic lab, which had been analysing the blood found on the broken chicken pot.
The breaking of the casserole pot at the moment that it was used to strike her had quite clearly cut the hands of the person who was holding it at the time, because on some of those ceramic pieces were found blood, the DNA of which did not match Nikki Collingbourne, but which did match that of Yvonne Kayler.
I knew in my mind, Yvonne has murdered Nikki. I just knew.
Yvonne Kayler was quickly charged with murder.
Well, of course.
Why would you think that's me?
Because to me, it looks like the person's wearing a wig and a beard.
Well, I don't know about a wig, but they look like they had a beard.
We suspect that person has murdered your sister.
Well, it ain't me, because I ain't going to be able to push on that door like that.
Yeah, you said, we believe it's you. You said it's not you.
I know, you can't believe you think it's me.
Having been charged with the murder of Nikki Collingbourne, Yvonne Kayler maintains her innocence, but is remanded in custody until a trial date is set. Nikki's body is released, so she can finally be laid to rest.
Nikki was loved by so many people. At a funeral, there were so many people there that obviously I knew, and so many people had travelled from all over to come to her funeral. They'd all bought pictures of her like at the nursery with the kids, and they all put it on a big board, and it was lovely.
But the funeral brings more devastating news for the family.
Nikki's mum, Rena, it destroyed her. She died like a day before the funeral. She didn't even get to bury her daughter.
With overwhelming evidence stacking against her, Yvonne Kaler has been charged with the murder of Nikki Collingbourne. Having pleaded not guilty, Kaler's trial begins at Luton Crown Court.
The main issue in the case was the identity of the person who had been captured on the CCTV forcing their way in. Because Yvonne Kaler's defence to the charge of murder was a perfectly simple one. It wasn't me and I was elsewhere at the time.
As the case opens, Nikki's family take to the stand.
I think I was one of the first people to give evidence. So I couldn't actually go and sit in the gallery until I'd given my evidence. I just remember when I did go in, that obviously the very first person I did see was Yvonne. She was just smirking, trying to make me feel uncomfortable.
And they reveal a major fallout between Nikki and her half-sister Yvonne when the latter came to the UK to visit family for a few months.
Yvonne had been at Nikki's for a few months. They'd had a few bad days, a couple of little rows, and either Yvonne or Nikki would end up in my mum's house, which is where we resided at the time. And, you know, we could kind of see the tension, you know, getting a bit more.
So I think they lived together for a very short length of time, like 5 months. But in that 5 months, a lot happened. Like, a lot happened. Yvonne was literally trying to manipulate Nikki into doing everything for her. It was like she was using Nikki, basically. She was just using her.
So when Nikki told us that she was going to evict Yvonne, we were ecstatic, really, because Nikki had been in a bit of a state for a couple of weeks, maybe a little bit longer.
Tension arose between them whilst they were living in the flat, and Nikki Collingbourne asked her to leave. On the day of her departure, there was unpleasantness between them, and Yvonne Kaler made a complaint to the police that Nikki Collingbourne had assaulted her. And the police came to the flat and they arrested Nikki Collingbourne, and she was taken to a local police station. Having interviewed her, it wasn't long before I think they realised that there wasn't any substance to the complaint, and she was released from custody, allowed to go home, and in fact nothing further was ever done in respect of that complaint.
But whilst Nikki was busy explaining herself to local police, it seems Yvonne was taking her revenge for being evicted.
While Nikki was being questioned, Yvonne paid a locksmith to break in, basically. She proved that she'd lived there because obviously she had paperwork to say that that was her address, but obviously she wasn't on the tenancy. And so the locksmith, like, he had no idea, because she was very manipulative. She just pulls the wool out over everyone's eyes.
Whilst Nikki was in custody with the police, Yvonne stole loads of stuff.
Once inside Nikki's flat, it seemed Yvonne stole some of her half-sister's belongings, something Nikki discovered when she arrived home.
Well, she immediately reported what had taken place to the police, that her sister had let herself in to what was Nikki's home without permission, and Yvonne Kaler was arrested as a result of that complaint.
But Yvonne seemed determined to wheedle her way out of trouble.
Yvonne Kaler was now in big trouble. She was facing a burglary charge and a trial at the Crown Court. She approached Nikki's ill, elderly mother in an attempt to persuade her to say that the property that she'd taken belonged to her.
She was subsequently charged with offences of burglary and doing acts tending and intended to pervert the course of justice, and those proceedings, that case was due to be tried at the Crown Court at Cambridge.
While awaiting her day in court for burglary, Yvonne was released on bail on the condition she didn't contact Nikki.
She breached those conditions. She would phone her up, try and make contact with her, and did so in such a way as to cause considerable alarm to Nikki.
Nikki was certainly living in fear of Yvonne due to the burglary and perverting the course of justice.
I think she was just hoping that Yvonne would get on a plane and go back to America and just leave her in peace, because wherever she went, she was always looking over her shoulder, and yeah, it wasn't very nice for her to see her like that. She'd gone completely within herself. She's not bubbly anymore.
Yvonne's trial for burglary and perverting the course of justice was listed for May 23rd. Her half-sister Nikki was due to give evidence against her, something which police believe made Yvonne carry out her deadly plan.
Yvonne Kayler is a very controlling and manipulative person. She likes to be in control. However, once she's charged with burglary and perverting the course of justice, the court process is out of her control. So to try and wrestle that control back, she's been very, very callous in planning and executing the murder of her stepsister.
The court hears how on the day she was due to stand trial for burglary, Yvonne donned her disguise and entered the flat where Nikki lived, approaching her door.
Then this shocking scene of the door being opened, and what we surmised from the way that she was dressed and the towel and the half-full bath is that Nikki had been in the bathroom with a towel wrapped round her, with just her underwear on. She was preparing to have a morning bath. She heard the doorbell go. She opened the door, and as she recognised it was her sister, she would have been really frightened and shocked at the realisation of seeing that, although it was her sister was disguised in this bizarre way, and I think she would immediately have known that she was in really serious danger. And there was a struggle at the door, and as you watched it, there were that awful couple of seconds where it looked as though she was just about to get the door shut, before finally it was forced open and Yvonne Kayler went in, and then the door shut behind her. And then 2 hours of nothing.
Once inside the flat, the prosecution claims Yvonne and Nikki argued in the kitchen, and as Nikki turned to walk away, Yvonne attacked her.
The chicken dish would have been picked up by two hands and used with considerable force, and Nikki would have been walking away from that. Certainly was enough to render her unconscious.
Then Yvonne panicked and tried to stage the scene.
There's been an attempt made to make this look like a suicide. So there was injuries to Nikki's wrists to make it look like she'd self-harmed. There was also a big tidy up of the flat, and including the staging of placing a dustpan brush in Nikki's left hand.
Having tried to make it look as though Nikki had cut herself on the broken pot and bled to death while trying to clear it up, Yvonne is once again caught on CCTV leaving the flat.
She was carrying some plastic bags that she hadn't had with her when she arrived, so she clearly had some property in the bags. One of the things which we consider she did when she left, and which was in the bag, were some of the remnants from the casserole pot that had been used. Because one of the things the police did was they put it all back together again. It was like a 3D jigsaw. But what it demonstrated once they'd done it was that there were a number of the pieces missing. We surmised that she'd realised that there was her blood on the broken pieces, and she had taken those which she could find with bloodstains on them in the plastic carrier bag. But unfortunately for her, unfortunately for us, she left a couple behind.
When Yvonne Kayler was shown the CCTV footage, her reaction was one of denial.
Yvonne, do you recognise the person in that CCTV?
Look, bow-legged, fat, bow-legged to me. I'm fat, but I'm not bow-legged. It looked like a man to me. I couldn't see his face.
As the trial progresses, Yvonne continues to deny her involvement. Then the prosecution calls a new witness.
Actually, the worst moment thinking about it through the trial was when they brought prisoner to give evidence against Yvonne.
We found out that there was a prisoner that Yvonne had spent some time with while she was on remand. She was going to be released quite soon.
She decided to draw a map of my flat and try and bribe a prisoner that was being released to set fire to my flat, knowing that my daughter was living here at the time with my 2 grandchildren.
She had this idea that if she gave her some of her DNA, I think it was blood, on a cotton bud or something, that she could leave the evidence there and set fire to it and say, well, someone's trying to frame me, because how would my blood be at a scene when I'm in prison? So someone's obviously framed me for the murder of Nikki.
But Yvonne's bizarre plan to try to suggest she had been set up for the murder didn't sway the jury. With all the facts presented to them, including the CCTV footage and the DNA evidence, the jury retires to consider its verdict.
So at one point in the trial, I honestly thought it was going to go the other way. It was like almost like her defence was like making it kind of out like she couldn't have possibly done this, and like honestly, we honestly thought at one point maybe she's going to get away with this. Honestly, it's a really scary feeling. Even though we knew all the evidence was there, it's convincing that jury that she did that.
On December the 19th, 2016, Yvonne Kayler is found guilty of murder and sentenced to life with a minimum of 20 years.
Yvonne Kayler could have accepted the burglary charges or gone to trial on the burglary charges and let the jury decide. But she decided not to. She hatched a plan, cold, calculated, and she killed Nikki Collingbourne rather than face a trial for burglary.
When the guilty verdict was read out, I think there was the biggest sigh of relief to know that she was going to be locked up and that we would just never have to have anything to do with her ever again, and that we could then tell our children that this bad person is now in prison and she can't touch any of us anymore.
After Nikki passed away, people would like come up to me and say how sorry they were, and they'd always have a memory of her helping them in some way. Like, she would literally go out of her way to help people. She loved to make people happy, and that's what Nikki lived for, because seeing other people happy made her happy. Like, I can't explain. She was just such a gentle soul.